I like these game and chill channels. It's like nice remixes of classic tunes. Morning. I never got into Pokemon though. Mm, Music's pretty good, but came out just after my time where I could dedicate a ton of time and effort to games. I guess I'm rephrase. The first one came out after that. Hmm. This is not where I want to be. And for whatever reason, I've not had the urge to get into any of the new variants. Although I do like watching other people play it. All right, we were here. Where were we? Here we go. You go over here. You slide down. Okay. Windows are in order. All right, so hopefully the presentations on Wednesday were good for you all. I like seeing what everybody's working on. Definitely pleased to see progress in everybody's projects, so that's good. And again, the thing to kind of keep in mind in this class is it is a software engineering class, so it's good to have a demo at the end, but the important thing is going to be the process and thinking about managing everything and the requirements and the project plans and all the documentation and all that fun stuff. Minimum viable product, absolutely necessary, but make sure that you take out the teamwork aspect. Make sure that you take out of this the effort in constructing a project. And just to give you a little bit of a what this can do to your brain, I suppose. I'm a good example of that. I love working on little hobby projects, so little games, little demos, all that fun stuff, to keep my mind occupied. That's what I do for fun. I probably spend way too long writing design documents for them or requirements in like a Google Sheet or something like that because I want to nail down exactly what I want to build. And then by the time I'm done with that, I run out of energy to work on the project and I'm on to something else. But at least I have all these nice little documents strewn throughout email drafts and Google documents and all that fun stuff with half-baked ideas that could be used someday. Yeah. So hopefully you get some of that ability to construct a project out of this class. Anyway, this is about where we left off. We were talking about how I guess, sorry, I should step back because I don't want to forget that. The feedback for, oops, people's demos is due by tonight. So if you forgot about that, it's just a short little write-up. Pick 4 minimum out of the 8 presentations or 7 presentations and just provide a little bit of feedback. I'll go through those all really briefly and I'm just going to dump them into like a shared document so that everybody can get a feel for what others think about their project. Maybe, again, constructive criticism, don't be overly negative. Don't be overly positive either. Let's give people good feedback. And if you receive feedback, don't take it personally if it's you guys should maybe focus on this or any of that. Everybody wants you to have a really good project, right? We want to try and elevate everybody. So be constructive is kind of the takeaway. Excuse me. So yeah, now actually talking about the slides, where do you give feedback? It's an assignment. So good question. Let me show you briefly here. This is 680. This is not 350. So I've got elevator pitch feedback due by March 19th, and it is under assignments. Should be okay. I'm going to be very excited once we pick a new learning management system because just the ability to sort nicely in Blackboard would be appreciated. I can guarantee this is going to slide back up once I click off the screen. Elevator pitch feedback. We have 8 teams provide feedback for at least 4. Be constructive. So I've got 4 little bullets for you to fill out here. And the recording is up if you missed it, or if you need to go back and refresh yourself. It's under class sessions, and then it's a internal Panopto video. Nobody else gets to see this since some of you were on camera. So, yeah, that's where everything is. All right. So next step of being a project manager, we started, we're talking about the different types of planning. We talked about how we actually construct timelines and that kind of fun stuff. Now we have to pick people. And one of the best things or the best qualities you can have as a project manager is to be able to delegate responsibility effectively. And what that means is not just giving everybody else your work, that it means assigning people to tasks that you feel they would be good at, right? So don't just, you know, give away all your work and make it look like you're doing nothing. A good project manager should be, you shouldn't really know that they're there in a way. Like they shouldn't be meddling in your business all the time, but they should be there when you need them, and they should fight for you if that is necessary to the upper level management. But a good manager will be able to get you an assignment, or if you're the manager, you should be able to assign people work that is appropriate for them. Um, and how do you figure that out? Well, that's again this whole dealing with people thing. Are they able to do the job? Hopefully. We talked about this last time and I kind of came at it from like a hiring perspective. Now we can kind of talk of it like we're project managers where I have a group of people, or I'm reading resumes if we go back to that idea. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What can we maybe do to help you along your way? But let's be able to give you a proper amount of work to move this project along. And if you're struggling, let's figure that out early on and get you the help that you need, whether it's training, whether it's additional support, just really figuring out what we have to do. So, personnel, this is one of those things. And I say one of those things, it's one of those things that you're going to have to either deal with as an employee, where you're going to be told what you're working on this week, whether you get a choice or not. Um, and as a manager, you're going to have to feel comfortable assigning people work, or at least setting up a path of communication where you can get feedback on what people want to do, what they don't want to do, what they're comfortable with, maybe if they want to go out and learn something new. All possible. This is one of those touchy-feely things where being able to work with people and have reasonable skills can really take you far up the corporate ladder. Um, as a bit of an aside, a lot of companies will have kind of two different paths. So, and this will depend company to company, obviously, but more or less there seems to be the possibility to go a more technical route where you become like a technical expert along the way. You are the senior engineer when you're done or something like that. But you are not managing people. You are very happy just working on projects. And you can advance that way, or you can go the management route where you start out doing basic engineering type stuff and then you kind of move up in the management ranks and you kind of structure projects, you structure budgets, you bring in all the people that you need and kind of go through all this stuff that we've been talking about in this module. They're both fully viable. It just kind of ends up being what you prefer to work on. So, if we are managing people, one of the things that we are going to have to be very good at setting up is the ability to have people communicate. And when you say that out loud, it sounds like it's something that should be trivial. Of course, we should all be talking all the time, but sometimes communication can break down, right? Very, very simple example is if one of you starts falling behind in class and you don't tell me, I'm not going to know what's going on and we can't, come to a good solution that, maybe we can give you some flexibility or something like that, right? Communication just broke down because, I'm on video, you're at home or in your dorm and nobody talks, right? But if there is a path of communication, usually there is some kind of a common understanding that people can come to. And I'm just kind of throwing that example out there just again in case if anybody is falling behind, please feel free to talk to me. But in a workplace, communication can break down because people get swamped with work. It doesn't have to be a personality thing. It can be that I am overloaded with tasks. I don't have time to email you back, or I don't have time to go to a 4 hour meeting to figure out what we do next in the project. Maybe I am mad at you and I'm just being petty and don't want to talk. Maybe we have some kind of an issue with our customer where they're not giving us feedback on requirements and we need this feedback to move forward, right? Communication can mean a lot of different things. It can be talking over the coffee machine, can be emails, can be phone calls, can be Zoom calls, um, project meetings, whatever it's going to be. It's just the ability to talk about your projects. And what we've kind of seen in terms of software engineering issues, this can lead to failures in your projects, right? It can be bugs that start manifesting. It can be issues that appear after release because we never really hashed out what's going on. Maybe we misunderstand requirements and we never get feedback on them. So basically, failure in communication can mean a lot of things. It's going to be up to you, the project manager, or the upstart young engineer who wants to enable better communication. Um, you need to really put forth an effort to support the idea of communicating with people. And it's not always as easy as it sounds. So let's say that you are all project managers, okay? And let's say that communication is starting to break down. So we have two groups, Group A and Group B. One is in charge of requirements, one is in charge of implementation. Say we have another Group C, they're in charge of testing, and they are not talking for whatever reason. How do we fix this if you are the mastermind architecting this project? Reach out to individuals. I like that one. Non-confrontational, hey, we need to figure this out. What can we do? Start a group meeting. Also a good one. So we can talk to people individually, try to figure out what's going on, and you don't have to take what you know of people as well when you start doing activities like this, okay? If I reach out to one of you and I say, hey, what the hell's going on with this? You might immediately become defensive. Like I am calling you out for behavior type of thing, right? Be able to use those people skills that we're working on developing. Hey, I noticed this project is starting to fall behind. Can we figure out what's going on? Don't directly call somebody out in front of the entire group, but try to figure things out. Start a group meeting. Okay, so let's all get in one room and talk. Maybe people didn't realize there is an issue. If we get everybody together, maybe we will start talking. Frequent group meetings. This one is one to be wary of. So I like the idea. I see the point. Depending on how well your meetings are run, that can be tricky because sometimes meetings can become a waste of everybody's time. Just has to be structured appropriately. Explain the problem and the consequences. That's usually a good one, right? You can be blunt, and sometimes people will appreciate that, sometimes they won't. I think I've mentioned before, I worked for a company that was very German, and there was no sugarcoating when there was a problem. It was, this is the problem. If we don't fix this, our customer cuts our project. There is no, you're doing a great job, continue onwards. It's get your crap together, otherwise we're done. Have team building exercises. Yep, we need to start doing some trust falls. There are some people that love those. There are some people that find those really annoying. Just kind of depends on your personality, but usually at the end, people do tend to have a good time. Um, when I was working as an intern, actually, I was working at a test track. So basically where we'd test out vehicles on a big area of testing. And one of the events we had was team paintball, and that was a lot of fun. Cut pay until everyone meeting, uh, 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 cut pay until everyone communicates. Okay, that's a little bit too far, but I can see where you're getting at. Punish early. Attends. Attends meetings. Okay, thank you. You start messing with people's pay, and then you get into legal issues usually. But consequences are not necessarily a bad thing. You know, autocorrect can be a lot of fun sometimes. That's fine. But yeah, so basically what I'm seeing here are that you are trying to get people together in some way. Sometimes you can be aggressive in this, sometimes you can be very open to fixing the issue, right? You have options, and it's going to depend on your makeup of your team, everybody's personality, right? One thing that you will probably experience when you go into the working world is at some point, and pretty much guarantee if you go to a bigger company, they will have you go do like some of those personality tests or um, figure out what type of communicator you are. It changes year to year what the metric is. I think I've taken two or three of them when I was working. They made us do the DISC evaluation to figure out your personality type and how you work with other people. And it's kind of weird, but companies like doing that type of stuff. Um, but basically, with all of these, be aware of the different types of people that you're working with. All right, if somebody takes everything personally, whether it's intended or not, you can't be super blunt and say, "Hey, you need to fix this," because they'll think, you're yelling at them when in reality it's just get your shit together and start working on it. Oh, but that's a soft skill to be developed, I think. Anyway, another we're talking about communication here, not weird personality tests. Um, with our projects, the number of communication lines that we can have basically can grow exponentially based on how many people are on your team. And this is one of the ways you can visualize communication breakdown. So if we have two people on a project, there's only one path of communication we have to worry about, right? Person A and person B stop talking. How do we fix that? We just get them talking again. But if you scale up to, say, 5 people, I should really invert this so it's a nice pentagram. Um, you have paths of communication between everybody. So you kind of see here, as you scale up the number of people, we actually have a relationship of how many ways people can talk. And if, say, one group stops communicating, that's a number of lines of communication that are broken down. And we have to fix that as project managers, right? If people are talking, that's good for the project, more or less. Now, hopefully they're, good communication lines. It's not adversarial. Now, I don't have a slide for the rest of these questions, so feel free to pop your answers into chat. Should mention this is intended to be a more interactive lecture today. But let's say that we have a waterfall project or an agile project. Do you think communication works differently between them? And I say communication, this can be, let's keep it more project focused, right? Not you've made friends with the person in the cube next to you. Let's go, out to the bar after work and go play video games all night or something like that. This is more, let's talk project issues, requirements, that kind of stuff. Waterfall, communicate during checkpoints. Okay, I could see that. Agile, communicate throughout. So that's a good take. I would counter though that you should be communicating more during waterfall as well. So good start. So a software project you have to be talking all the time anyway. Waterfall, you're a little bit more excuse me, a little bit more rigorous in terms of your checkpoints, right? So that's probably why we have that there. You probably are still going to have things like weekly meetings or bi-weekly meetings, depending. It's going to be, here's what everybody has worked on, here's the issues we're currently facing, that kind of thing. Agile, usually you have daily stand-ups, right? So we have daily team meetings. Recharge headset, got it. Nobody else heard that but me. But basically, you're forced to have a daily 1 minute pitch of what you're working on and that kind of fun stuff, right? We talked about that with our process models. Waterfall, you should do a little bit more than during checkpoint time, though, because checkpoints can be months in between, depending on your project. But at least make sure that we are continuing to talk. But yeah, the idea is, I guess, a little bit more frequent meetings in Agile, but less formal, I suppose. That kind of depends on your project manager or your Scrum master, sorry. Takes me a minute to pull up all the different terms that mean the same thing in the different processes. Yeah, good ideas. Any other thoughts here? All right, that works out pretty well. So, things that have been brought up so far. It is constant and scheduled. I like that one too. And that kind of fits in with, I think that's Sarah's point. We are making sure that we talk, right? Whether it is every single day, whether it's every week, we have times to touch base and make sure everybody's on the same page. Okay, so this is a fun slide for me because I get to soapbox a little bit and you all get to accept my theories here. Meetings. You all are being forced to do weekly meetings, and whether they have been beneficial or not is really up to your teams, right? And I have very minimal requirements on what you have to be talking about. And I'm not participating in your meetings, so I don't get a feel for how productive you are or not. Keep in mind, during your weekly meetings, you should be active and talking, and there should be a reason to talk. And if it's just to touch base and see how everybody's doing, that's fine. But, don't sit there for an hour with nobody talking. Let's talk meeting structure. Meetings are the thing that everybody likes to complain about, whether it is forced in class meetings or work meetings. Everybody's going to have issues with them. So let's look at some of the things that can cause meetings to break down and why people dislike them. First reason, its purpose is unclear. I have called a meeting, you all have to join, but I didn't tell you why. Or I was very obtuse about why we're having this meeting. I could say, hey, everybody, I need all 30 of you in the room right now. We have to talk about requirements. And you're all going to be like, okay, what's wrong with them? We spent a year developing them, but I didn't tell you anything like that. Or we get in and we spend 10 minutes shooting the small talk, right? We waste a lot of time. Purpose is unclear. This kind of irks people because everybody's time is valuable. If I'm spending an hour in a meeting that I don't need to be at, I'm going to get pretty ticked off about it. And I know you all probably will as well. Another thing, the attendees are unprepared, and this can work both ways. Either I do a terrible job at telling you what we have to be doing in the meeting, or you don't bother to prepare and you look like you are just floating along doing nothing. So either I have very poorly structured the meeting and I gave you 0 things to prepare for, or you didn't take the effort to prepare for the meeting. Every meeting should have a purpose, right? It's not to get together to, love each other and just chat. Everybody's time is valuable in the workplace. If this is a for fun meeting, let's get together over lunch and play board games or something like that, that's different, right? We can have dedicated times where we just kind of blow off steam and relax. But if we're working on something, everybody's time is absolutely valuable. Don't waste people's time. One thing that you will find when you go into industry is that there are people out there that like to call meetings where every single one of these complaints that you're going to see is absolutely true. and you're going to wonder why you were even in this meeting, and you're going to feel like it's a waste of your time. Just that's the cynical side in me coming out. Hopefully people have fixed that by now, but just calling a meeting doesn't mean progress is going to be made. We have to be very clear and very rigorous, structure these things well. Other meetings, we can have people that are absolutely critical, right? You are in charge of presenting something, or you are the technical expert on a topic and we need your input. You are the quality manager telling us which testing strategy we're using, but you're late or you don't show up. If you're late, that's 10 minutes of, again, everybody's time that has been wasted because we are all waiting for you to come in. So be punctual and actually show up if you're supposed to be there. Another one, conversation veers away from its purpose. So we talk about how the Red Wings did last night for 10 minutes. Or I go off on a rant about software engineering and you're all sitting there wondering why he's still talking. Or, we spend an hour discussing politics or where we're going for lunch. And the people who are sitting in there are, again, wondering why we're in a meeting to talk about this. Couldn't you do that over Slack or Teams or Discord or whatever? So hopefully kind of the key that or the thread you're seeing throughout all of these is that you're wasting people's time and effort. Participants argue. So we come into a meeting being prepared to hash out requirements or hash out a project issue, and rather than work towards a solution, we just fight, or we get petty, or. Basically, people sometimes get defensive, and they're going to dig in and argue that point whether it's correct or not. And this can lead to a very combative meeting. And nothing gets accomplished, people get upset. If you start seeing this thing happen, it's kind of your role as the project manager, or maybe one of the cooler heads to step in and maybe try to diffuse the situation. All right, so we have that. Another thing, decisions are never enacted afterwards. So we have a great 4-hour meeting. We have hashed out a problem. We know the solution. But in order for that to work, we have to do a series of steps. So we all agreed on this, and then we never actually fulfilled those decisions. We just sloughed off and didn't do the extra work. What was the point of having the meeting then? So here are some common complaints. And if you have not experienced them directly yet, you probably have seen this in team meetings, whether you realized it or not. But this is the kind of thing that can happen in the real world. And all these points here, again, they came out of these slides. It's like somebody was a fly in the wall in some of the meetings I used to participate in. I have been a part of all of these. And if you are ever in a meeting with me, if I'm running a meeting and I say we have an hour to talk about something, if we're done with the topics at 20 minutes, I will say, okay, we've done everything we need to do today. We can end early. That's my perspective. I like meetings to be very well run. I like them to be well managed and clear in what we have to do. And once we're done with those topics, you don't have to stick around, right? You have other things to do with your life rather than sit here and talk about the weather or sports or politics or whatever it is. So that's my perspective. But how do we make meetings work? Point number one, make sure you have the correct people. If I call an all hands meeting meaning everybody on the project or on my staff or whatever it is, make sure the people who need to be there are there. Make sure the people who don't need to be there aren't there. And this is not because we don't like you. Like, if you want to come to this meeting, you're welcome, but it would be a waste of your time to come. So make sure the appropriate people are there. Don't call an all hands meeting every single week where you just give an update that could be handled by an email or by a group message or something like that. It's a waste of everybody's time again. Another point, develop an agenda. This is one of those things that I have you all do with your weekly minutes. Ideally, you have a set of points to talk about. And whether you do or not, hopefully you're kind of migrating towards using those 3 bullets. This is what we're doing this week. This is what we're doing next week. Use those to kind of structure what you're talking about and what needs to be done. Because without an agenda, you're just going to be sitting there in a meeting feeling like you have no idea what to talk about. And that leads back to, why are we even having the meeting? So have a set list of key points to talk about. And once you get through that agenda, make sure everybody's good. End the meeting early if you need to. Another thing, have somebody keep an eye on the discussion. So usually we call this person the scribe, or we basically say, hey, can somebody jot down what we talked about? Usually the person leading the topics and leading the discussions is not that person. Because if I'm running a meeting and I'm doing all the talking, it's going to be really annoying for everybody if I stop and take 5 minutes to type down what I just said. Have somebody write stuff down as you go, if that is necessary. Last but not least, make sure somebody is in charge of following up. So if we have a meeting to talk about tasks that have to be done, make sure there's somebody who is holding us to that set of points. Right? Person A is going to develop an agenda for next week. Person B is going to work on the GUI. Person C is going to call the customer to get feedback. Person D is going to order pizza because we have to work through lunch today because we're so far behind. Just have somebody send out a note, hey, did you get that done? Or make sure that the task was checked into our configuration management system. Again, this is my soapboxing. This is how I feel meetings should be run. If you take anything out of this, don't waste people's time. That is the #1 way to make people ticked off at you. He said from experience. Makes sense, though? And what I'm kind of hoping is that with your team meetings, you're probably experiencing some of the complaints, right? You're probably seeing this. And hopefully you're kind of figuring out ways internally to manage that. But meetings are one of those things that people never really talk about in any... I never had any class ever where they told me how to run a meeting. So I'm very happy to at least distill some of this down to you in one slide here. But make them worthwhile. Otherwise, it's a waste of time. All right, so back to personnel then. Now, how do you organize a project? We have a number of people to work with, and let's say that we are structuring who's going to be working on what. Okay, and we're going to structure how the project is going to be run. Depending on your background, depending on your makeup of your team, you can develop a different management style, you can develop different project styles, and this can all work within a particular development process, right? You could do some of this in Waterfall, you could do it in Agile. It just kind of depends on your team and how it's going to work. Maybe you have a chief programmer type of setup where you have the lead technical expert who makes all of the decisions regarding the makeup of the project. Think of the senior engineer who has picked, okay, we're using Java, we're doing object-oriented, maybe we're using, if we're making a game, we're going to use an entity component system, we're going to do it in Unity, we're going to have somebody in charge of technical decisions. We're going to have one person in charge of leading the design or the requirements. Basically, we have somebody at the top of our technical people. That's one way to do things, right? A lot of projects will work that way. You have one technical expert, and everybody else kind of follows along with what that person's doing. Now, they can be taken to task or they can be questioned, right? It's not like we have a dictatorship type of thing, but usually they'll be making the key decisions with appropriate supporting materials, right? Or there's a egoless approach, and that's kind of a cynical point to make there. Everybody is responsible for their own thing, right? So we don't have a pyramid structure, we have like a flat structure where everybody's in charge of their own little project, right? You can make the key decisions that you're able to make. You're not waiting for feedback from on high type of a situation. And you can have stuff in between too, right? You don't have to be, these are opposite extremes. But these are different ways that we can organize a project. How do you basically develop that organization chart or an org chart to show who's responsible for what? So another question for you all. Let's let me skip a slide and then I'll come back here. So I'm going to guess that none of you have seen an org chart unless if you have worked in industry before. But basically, if you have never seen one, um, this is going to be a list of project roles and who reports to whom. So who's on top, who's helping them, what are the other roles participating here? So here we have that chief programmer approach where the technical expert, the chief programmer, is on top making all the key decisions for the project. This person will have an assistant, probably doing similar ideas, helping out maybe less critical decisions that need to be made. Ideally, this chief programmer is somebody very experienced um, with a lot of knowledge of the company, its projects, its workings, also technical expertise. And then under the assistant here, we'll have senior programmers, so they've been around for a little while, but not long enough to be upper management types of stuff. We'll have the rest of our team, so our configuration management person, our admins, our testers, our fresh out of college or intern programmers. Basically, we're going to have kind of a tree structure here, right? Kind of a pyramid type of structure. Um, I thought I had a figure for the other one. But with a team makeup, whether we have this kind of tree pyramid type structure, how do you think this would relate to the process model we choose? Do you think there's any kind of correlation there? So if I pick the V model versus Agile, or if I go Spiral or prototyping, or any of these, does the organization of our team matter? Am I cutting in and out? Um, hmm. Could be my headset. Could be my headset. Oh, just you, okay. So my headset says it needs to recharge, so I'm wondering if I'm cutting out that way. I'll check the recording after class to make sure. But I guess just answer does the question make sense? No, he is good. Okay, that's good. I get this very angry female voice in my ears when they don't. There it goes. I wish you could hear that because she sounds pissed off at me. Just charge my batteries, please. I think yes and no. Yeah, I think, well, we're going to need these people regardless. Yeah, pretty much. It's like that robot in Futurama. I think it's the second or the first revival season where you have the robot made of the water mill and she runs out of water. Oh my God! Uh, Good plug to go check out Futurama if you haven't yet. All right, so yes and no. Yes, we are going to need these people. Awesome. I'm glad my references still hold. So if we are going this route, this is a very classically structured project, right? So you are more than likely going to see something like this if you go with any of the pre-agile methods, honestly. This is your standard company structure. And I guess the question is mainly if we go a more flexible, agile type of route, do you have this type of setup? And the answer to that is basically, I think what Jacqueline went at with it kind of depends on your company. So there are some engineering firms where you can consider them the utopia type of situation where you don't have a senior, requirement or quality manager getting mad at you, or you don't have a HR person breathing down your neck for project makeup. We have a completely fluid, flat structure. I'm going to work on requirements today. I'm going to work on configuration management setup for this week because I've worked with GitHub before. And next week, I'm going to be the lead developer on the GUI, or I'm going to be the lead backend developer. Depends. You're probably still, for a successful project, going to need somebody to lead. And that person probably would be like your Scrum Master. But we probably will have somebody at the top, but then we might have a more flat structure underneath that. Just kind of depends. And again, it'll be a series of trade-offs. If you have something rigorously defined like this, you know exactly what your role is, right? There's no question that I am reporting. If I'm a junior programmer, I'm reporting to the senior programmers, right? The senior programmer is probably in charge of a particular module, and I don't have to worry about that module slipping because I have a list of people responsible for it. Whereas if we're a completely flat structure where there's a lot of flexibility, hopefully these things are going to be fleshed out, but there's nobody that's directly responsible at that point. So it just kind of depends, honestly. What this really gets at, though, is the level of uncertainty we are willing to deal with. So we can have very highly structured and very loosely structured environments. So the example here, this is extremely well structured. And well structured meaning everybody knows their purpose, right? I don't have the flexibility to go off and be a requirements engineer because I am in charge of implementing a communications protocol. I can't sit down and do requirements because I'm busy programming a CAN protocol or an Ethernet based protocol. Okay. There's a high level of certainty. We know exactly what's going on. But the downside is it's repetitive, meaning that if I am a junior programmer tasked with programming some kind of a communication system, I'm using like an embedded systems network type of example here. I'm going to be doing that for every single project because that's what I'm good at. Good at is relative for me. It can be repetitive because, we're going to do that for every project. It's really hard to be creative in that kind of an environment. And if you're fine with doing the same thing project to project to project, this is absolutely going to be a perfect environment for you. But if you get bored at work very easily, this can be a negative and it can really kill people's morale if you don't give them the ability to learn something new. But on the other hand, if you have big projects where there's a lot of moving pieces, this kind of structure is absolutely necessary to make sure everything gets done. I'm going to pick on the team doing multiplayer, or at least the team that, started with multiplayer. That is a big project. Whether you think you can do it, I'm very happy that I was proven wrong too, because multiplayer is a very tricky thing. Not only are you building in physics and 3D and all of the stuff that you would need for a single player game, now you have to build in networking, you have to build in corrections for if there are latency issues, you have to build in lobbies and chat and all kinds of extra things where that becomes a big project very quickly. Whereas if it was single player, it'd be a lot more focused and small. And I'm not saying one's better than the other. Obviously, shoot for the moon if you can with this, but it's very easy to lose something along the way. And if you have a structured project team, you know exactly what's going to be going on. On the other hand, if you have a loosely structured environment, and this would be your more agile style, there's a lot of uncertainty. Right? If we go back here and we have a flat team where everybody is a senior programmer, because we all have been working at the same place for 10 years, let's do a very fluid environment. Well, who's working on what? There's a lot of uncertainty there. With that, though, we have the ability, let's try something new. Okay? Maybe our standard, let's plug something into Unity and make a game out of it, structure is just not going to work for this new project. Let's render something out in Blender and then export it to Babylon.js. Let's try something new. Or let's use a new technology, let's use a new vendor, let's use some open source project we found. We have the flexibility to do that because we have time and we have the ability to explore something new. Flexibility comes at a cost though, because if you have a big project, things can really easily fall in the weeds. But if you have a very small project where you have the ability to explore new things and still meet your main deliverables, that can be a positive. Again, this is a class of trade-offs. There is not a right answer here. Okay, it depends on your team, it depends on your needs, and it depends on what the project's success will look like. So pick your structure kind of in line with your development process, honestly. Now, there was an experiment that was done for two groups that were building a hotel. So this is a civil engineering and architecture project where two groups build a literal hotel. And I've mentioned this earlier on when we were talking about project planning and all that fun stuff. Um, there's a lot of parallels from software engineering to other engineering disciplines. That's why we call it engineering. Whether you're a computer scientist or not, a software engineer is a person with an engineering background. So we have two teams, a structured and an unstructured team, where the structured team had very clearly defined responsibilities and roles. You are the foreman. You are in charge of the building plans. You are in charge of building floor one. You're in charge of the electrical, the plumbing, so on and so forth. The unstructured team was self-organizing. They have no direction. They have a flat responsibility structure. Okay, so this is a literal experiment. The results were repeatable. They're always the same. Now, I don't know how many times she repeated this experiment, but the structured teams finish, and this is not an exact, I mean, this is we're kind of equating them to things. The structure team always delivered a functional days in, and if you don't know what a days in, it's like your budget somewhere in between a motel and a hotel type of thing. It's where you go on a family vacation to save money if you can. Usually there's a pool and an acceptable breakfast and basic rooms, but that's about it. But if you have a structured team, they'll always give you what you wanted, functional. The unstructured team comes up with something creative, they come up with something really impressive, but it's not always quite completed. And kind of the idea here is that if you give people flexibility and the ability to be creative, and you don't impose any kind of a rigorous structure, you will get something really impressive without finishing, if that makes sense. So maybe we left off the roof, or we forgot to add in plumbing, or, right? Some things fell by the wayside. And if you want to be a good project manager, your job is to figure out the balance in between the two. How do you have a rigorously defined team and still have the ability to deliver large projects with very little uncertainty, right? It's going to be a balance for you there. Now, let's see where I'm at for, oh, this is actually the last slide, so this works out nicely. And this can be an open question to you. What kind of a team would you like to work on? And this could be term project, it can be in real life, right? Where would you like to work? Do you want to work in a big company? You know, you're going to go to GE, you're going to go to automotive, you go to a healthcare company where your role is very explicitly defined when you're hired or by your project manager. You know exactly what you have to do. Or do you want to go to a startup where everybody, you know, we all wear hoodies and t-shirts and high tops instead of button-down shirts and khakis? Everybody is a senior developer. Do you want to go to that environment where you can be creative, but maybe you don't have a fixed responsibility? It's finding a balance in between, which is really tricky, I think. So that is it for these slides. Anybody have any questions before I close off the session? So what we'll do next time is we'll pick up with some more. We'll be talking about risk and uncertainty. And I will put out your next assignment soon. You'll have a little bit of time to work on it. It will be group-based. Hint, hint, it's going to be involving project planning. So get hyped for that. Otherwise, I hope you have a very good weekend. See you on Monday. It's supposed to be warm, so hopefully you can get outside and relax a little bit. But bye, everybody. See ya.